Hi everyone, you've met me before. My name's Derek. So I work for a Brisbane AI software company called Digital. We build all kinds of AI software and integrations that work with AI too. In fact, the integrations are often the more important part of the work that we do. Today I'm presenting with our founder, Andrew Davis. Hi Andrew. The subject of our talk today is AI-powered chart generation from handwritten World War II document archives. Now, this might sound like a very exotic thing to most people here. Could I get a quick show of hands? Who's used AI automation in this room? Okay. Oh, we got a couple of people, great. Now, who's used a spreadsheet that has Gemini AI built into every cell? I see, we found our target audience. We found one person, very interesting, very cool. So before we begin, just a quick dedication. This presentation is dedicated to all the men and women who selflessly served Australia during World War II and other wars. We honour their memory. So Digital is a Brisbane-based AI software development company. Our approach is business-led, so we're a little bit different to other software companies that just build tech. We look at the business case first, and we only build tech that saves time, money, and stress. That's sort of our ethos and how we operate. Today we're going to demonstrate the use of a sophisticated AI stack for automated legacy document recognition at scale. Those last two words are really important, at scale. It's very easy to write a piece of software, but it's very difficult to write a piece of software that processes millions of documents. That's a very different game. We're also going to talk about new products that we're busy creating as we speak using Gemini AI. So how do we go? I'm going to see, can everyone see my cursor? Okay. So how do we go from here, from World War II service records, which are stored by the National Archives of Australia, and there's literally millions of them, to here? An LLM data transformation where we can talk with our data. Tedious workflows have been collapsed. We have a spreadsheet with embedded AI in every cell, and all of our data is rated by confidence. Now, I need to stress, we want to get there from a bunch of essentially scribbled paper documents, 1.5 million of them. How do we bridge that gap? And considering a lot of these were handwritten during the 1940s, it's not just a simple matter of running OCR on these things. That's not going to work. So how do we get there? So the purpose of this talk is to show how two new AI technologies can help us make better use of the absolutely vast treasure trove of data that's available worldwide. A lot of people don't realize just how much volume, what a large volume of data there is in the world. Who knows what a zettabyte is? So hands up if you've ever even understood what a zettabyte is before you came into this talk. So I put a little label there on the bottom. What is a zettabyte? It's 1 billion 1.0 terabyte hard drives. That's 1 zettabyte. It's a lot. And there's around 80 zettabytes of data in the world, and it's exponentially increasing. So we need new tools, and this is where AI comes to the rescue, because it becomes humanly impossible to even deal with that data. We need some much, much more powerful cognitive tools to deal with it. So a lot of this data is actually very difficult to access or read. That's the big problem. Like the old handwritten documents from World War II that we're going to be looking at. But AIs like Gemini are able to solve this problem with the amazing invention of multimodal input to AIs, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail soon. But that one word is really important there, multimodal input. Most people think of AIs and LLMs as something you type into a chatbot, but they have actually got a lot more power when you start feeding them images. Most people don't realize that. The question we'll be answering in this talk is, how do we get from a vast archive to a place where we can talk with our data and process it very quickly and conveniently? Let's look at a real-life public domain example, the National Archives of Australia, war records. So the NAA stores over 1.5 billion records like the one you're seeing on your screen. Notice how a lot of the text is handwritten and hard to read. But what if we wanted to import 1.5 million documents like this into a data table? Most organizations have their data spread out across multiple silos, and different software is commonly required to access each of these data silos. This is very common. I've read some statistics where some organizations have over 70 different applications for each different type of data they're accessing. Those are incredible numbers. Imagine learning 70 programs. If you think about it, it's actually not that crazy. You have Google Sheets, Google Email, Google Slides, Gmail, Outlook, the numbers add up very quickly. And each one of those is a silo. And they're all separated from each other. There's no one unifying data store here at all. This presents a massive challenge when we're gathering large volumes of data for use by modern AI technology like LLMs. How do we actually get the data into the LLM in the first place? That's a big question. A lot of these systems were never designed for this use case. This is a massive problem today. You might have the world's greatest API and the greatest AI to feed data into, but how are you actually going to get the data in there in the first place? The user interfaces for these systems were designed to be used by people, not machines. So why don't we just use RPA software to automatically scan and import all of these documents from these crusty old legacy systems? So just by the way, if you've never heard of RPA, it's Robotic Process Automation. In other words, automating the normal operations that a user is doing on a computer in such a way that the same result is achieved. For example, opening an email, saving an attachment to a document. That's something you can automate with an RPA. So RPA is a popular previous generation tool, and I use the word previous generation because what we're showing today is next generation. It's a tool for automating repetitive processes, for example, filling out forms. There's many popular previous generation RPA packages available, like Pega, Appian, and UiPath. But these previous generation RPAs all suffer from the same problems. Rule-based RPA automation scripts, like the one you can see over here, so that's a common example of a rule-based script. They require a significant expertise to write. The manufacturers will say that it's a drag and drop interface, but in reality, to do anything serious, you often end up creating something that's just as complex as a complex program where you would actually write lines of code. So that's very common. Low code is a lie. And I'm going to say this to the camera. Low code is a lie. Don't believe the salesman who tell you low code is just there. Low code can help you to set the parameters and initial things, but if you want to do anything of significance, you're always going to have to break into something that's more powerful. The pricing model for RPA also tends to be very expensive. So you're looking at enterprise licenses that start at $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 per year. For a lot of small companies, that's just out of reach or doesn't make business sense at all. But probably the biggest issue is that RPAs do not automate legacy apps or things like complex 3D apps. They're not really built for that. What RPAs are built for is to automate websites and filling in forms on websites. I use the word websites there very specifically. There are many, many more kinds of apps than websites, and a lot of the world's biggest pieces of data sit outside of the web. For example, in old legacy systems, a lot of them don't even have web interfaces at all. So RPAs, in order to do that, they often also rely on browser plugins. So good luck getting a Chrome plugin into an IBM, AS360 system that was built in the 90s. I wish you the best of luck. So how do we solve all these problems with RPA? In 2023, a new technology became available for this, and it's called intent automation. So what is intent automation? Intent automation uses an LUIM, a large user interface model. It's an AI model that identifies elements on your screen and then analyzes a prompt to determine your intent with what you want to do. For example, what do you want to do? Do you want to click a button? Do you want to type something into a form? So it works at a much higher level than robotic process automation does. The reason we're introducing intent automation is because it's far more flexible and powerful than RPA for interrogating legacy data systems and difficult to use systems. Legacy apps and shadow DOMs are easily handled by intent automation. Now, if you've never done any front-end development in a website, probably won't know what a shadow DOM is. A shadow DOM is a very common thing. I don't know if you've ever tried to go on a website and right-click and save a picture. Like maybe you saw a nice picture, you try to right-click and save it, and then it just gives you some weird HTML file, and you can't get the picture, and you're like, oh, it's right there, I just want to save my picture. You've just run into a shadow DOM. So what happens is the website layers various domain elements on top of the picture, and that's what you're actually clicking on. That's why you can't reach the picture, unless you know how to use the object inspector and so on. But the problem is RPA tools cannot deal with shadow DOMs. They just, unless you have a very sophisticated plugin and you actually hack the document object model in the web page, they ain't gonna work. This is actually a much bigger problem than people realize. But intent automation has no problem like this because it works at a visual level. It's using a multimodal input to an AI, which is a very, very different thing. It sees what you see, in other words. Finally, the data output can be handed off to an AI smart spreadsheet for further refinement, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we wanted to introduce a new product today. We're very excited to announce Assure AI Automation. It's developed in Brisbane by ourselves, by 3.digital. So Assure is a new cutting-edge AI-powered intent automation platform that we've designed to collapse time-consuming workflows and repetitive tasks. And now, as I mentioned before, RPA software does exist, but this is the next generation. It doesn't have all of the flaws of RPA software. That's why we built it. We actually built Assure for our own purposes. What we're having here is we're actually running Assure on a legacy database, and this entire workflow you see here is being automated by the AI. So we've actually trained the AI to look for particular user interface elements on the screen in a certain sequence, and it clicks them and it types in the text and, for example, the invoice number and so on. But the important thing you need to know about this workflow is that it's a very common example of a crusty old legacy workflow. Every company has hundreds of these things. We're able to build this whole training script and make it run perfectly in a couple of hours, just using a very, very basic knowledge, what I would call junior programmer level of knowledge. So Assure uses intent automation to do this, and it can operate things like cloud desktops, legacy apps with human-like precision, and it can interact seamlessly with many, many different kinds of apps that RPA doesn't. For example, desktop applications, web applications, terminals, older applications through a remote desktop, and so on and so forth. My wife is actually sitting in the audience, and she works for a big bank, and she spends all day dealing with very, very old legacy applications. Some of them are still command line based, and I wish she could use these tools in her job. It was partially our inspiration for doing this. So what we are using is a large user interface model to identify and navigate these complex user interfaces. And it's important to understand that we're using visual element recognition. So we're not writing a script that we have to change our code in order to make it all work. We're literally just saying, LLM, I need you to look for this element. It looks like this, and it's next to that element. So we use a more visual language. The way I would describe it is, imagine if you're talking to your grandmother over the phone, and you're telling her how to reset her password in her email. That's the same way that you talk to the LLM. You say, so just on the top of the screen, look to the left there, there's a little blue button with change password, click that button. You talk to the LLM in exactly the same way. Those are the kinds of prompts you use. But instead of generating text, it automates whatever's on your screen, or in a cloud container, which we'll get into momentarily. How am I going for time?
You're going
good?
Yeah.
So let's look at the benefits of using intent automation versus RPA. And we don't want to turn this into a sales pitch for our product. We're developing a platform. This is more of an educational presentation about how it all works and the pros and the cons. But there's actually a reason we developed this, and it was for our own project. We built a piece of plugin software for a very complex 3D modeling program called Autodesk Revit. So because we built a plugin living inside of another program, we were unable to use any existing RPA software to automatically test and do QA testing. And we had a scenario where we had 50 complex 3D engineering models for building steel frameworks, and each model had to have hundreds of checks applied by users clicking buttons. So 50 times 100 operations is many, many thousands, and this would take weeks for the QA team to do. It's very grueling, very labor-intensive work, and we thought, surely there's a way we can automate these repetitive tasks. I mean, we're software developers. But then we looked around and we tried a few things, and we realized RPA doesn't work in this case. And there's many, many companies that face the same problem. They've got very specialized software that is not a web app that they want to test and run automations on, but they cannot. That's where intent automation and the LUIM helps us. It has effectively universal support for apps. If it's on your screen, it can be automated. Thank you very much for the dramatic thing. If it's on your screen, it can be automated. And it also supports every major operating system. So Linux, Windows, Mac OS, it all works. And the reason for that is because it's simple. It's not a complex plugin for some other thing. It's just clicking a mouse and typing things on a keyboard exactly the same way as a human and looking at the screen. It's simple. So it's very important to understand. I make it sound complicated, but actually the way it works is very simple. And very much like ChatGPT, you don't really know how it works. It just gives you the right answer. The LUIM is the same thing. Another great thing about it is it's software installation free. So you don't necessarily have to install lots and lots of plugins on your computer to use it, which is a great big deal in an enterprise environment where that is difficult, where they have 10 million rules you have to follow to install a piece of software. Another really important thing about LUIM models is that the AI adapts to changes in your UI appearance without needing to be altered. So by this I mean, let's say I run my program at a different screen resolution, like full HD versus 4K. A lot of the UI elements may move around on the screen, or maybe if I just even maximize my window, UI elements are going to move around. Sometimes even the appearance is going to change. And in many traditional automation software platforms, that breaks the automation. You then have to go back and add in a special case just for that resolution. They become brittle, in other words, the previous generation platforms. But the LUIM does not have that problem because it is using multimodal AI to recognize what is on the screen in the same way that a human does. It's working at a much higher level than pixels, in other words. This is a very important concept to understand. We're working at a much higher level than pixels now. We're in the executive space here. We're not at the coalface anymore. We're basically executives of automation. And that's a beautiful place to be. Finally, we're able to export the results to an AI smart spreadsheet. This is something I don't think anyone in this room has ever seen. It's a very, very exciting tech. Let's get closer into it. So I've already described a lot of this, but I just wanted to quickly go through what a complete workflow looks like for us in end-to-end automation. So we start out with the legacy data. This can be almost anything. It could be an IBM AS360 server in California that nobody has maintained for 30 years. It potentially could be that, or it could be a web app, or in our case, it was a plugin inside an already very complex piece of 3D software where it was not possible to inject RPA. So Assure obtains data from that by simulating human interactions. So you saw the little video before, and we'll show some more examples later. The process runs, and it outputs the same files as you would as a user. So if you run through that process and maybe save a PDF or something, you get this exact same output as a human user would, which you can then move on to the next step. So that's the automated data retrieval that's happening here. Then you've got a lot of options. So once you've got your data, there's two major things that people have asked us to do. The first obvious thing is, can you build me ChatGPT for my crusty old database? So that's a very popular option. And a great way to do that is to build what's called a RAG. So RAG stands for Resource Augmented Generation. Very important AI concept to understand. So for example, a model like Gemini is trained on many, many billions of parameters. In other words, they feed billions of documents into it. But that's kind of set in stone, all of that knowledge. What if you want to add new domain-specific knowledge? Like for us, it was about engineering stuff that's not in that model. The model won't know anything about it. So you use resource augmented generation. Effectively, you put another database on top of what the LLM already knows, and it's then able to access that immediately. People are starting to see how to use that when, for example, you upload a textbook into Gemini as context, and it can then give you answers based on what's in the textbook. That's an example of resource augmented generation. And it basically makes the base AI model a lot more powerful and a lot more suited to your purposes. And then you can do very cool things like build a RAG LLM app on a phone where it becomes as easy to use as the Gemini or OpenAI apps. You can just type in a question, but all that domain-specific knowledge has been pulled out of the legacy data store. That's the important thing here. It's not present in a normal LLM app, only in your app, in your company or in your business. And another also very interesting thing you can do with this data is you can import it into a smart AI spreadsheet. So this, to me, is, I've shown this to a few people, and everybody I show it to, their mind is blown. And I'm going to explain why later. But basically, the big question is, once you've got all this data in a nice and easy to use format, what are you actually going to do with it? Typically, businesses want to do a lot more than just look at it. They want to analyze it and get all the value out of it and learn things from it. So let's take a look at a real-life AI intent automation example. We're going to create some charts from handwritten World War II document archives. And I mean handwritten. You'll see in the video in a moment. So this video was generated by our Assure software, which is our AI intent automation platform. Assure uses a large user interface model to iterate through handwritten documents on the NAA archive site. You can actually see it running here. So everything you're seeing here is not being done by a human being. I trained our large user interface model to do everything you see here. But because I'm a software developer, I was able to do things like have loops and functions and variables to automate it in a really sophisticated way. And although that might sound very complicated and technical, it only took me a couple of hours. And I only needed to have basic computer science 101 knowledge to do it. It's very easy to train this model because it is so powerful. So what you're seeing doing here is it's running through a very large number of forms on the site, and what it's doing is it's downloading the original scanned documents from the National Archives. Now, it's important to understand that just 5 years ago, this process would have been either mostly manual, or it would have taken me days to write special RPA scripts and things like that. It would have been a lot harder. But because we're using a large user interface model to recognize things on the screen, like it knows when there's things on the screen, it actually reads your screen, we don't really have to worry about things like changes in screen resolution or anything like that. We're just dealing with large groups of elements on the screen, and we can do almost anything we like. So what do we do with all this data now that Azure has extracted it? So in this example, I extracted hundreds and hundreds of images from the National Archives, attestation records. So when people signed up, that's what I was extracting, just to have something that's public domain to show you guys. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to our founder, Andrew Davis, and he's going to explain what you do once you've used the AI to extract all this data into a more usable format. Thank you, Andrew. It's all yours.
Thanks, Marty.
You're welcome. Yes.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Yep, cool. And I have to say, I'm going to be with Phil on this, and it's going to be Gemini, not Gemini. Sorry, buddy.
Big debate today.
It is. It really is. So as you've seen, we're building an amazing AI intent automation platform. So that can extract absolutely staggering amounts of data. So what we're going to have a demo for you today is just a subset of what we can do. This can expand to millions of records. But how can we transfer this data into usable format so we can extract the knowledge? And of course, it's by using our smart AI spreadsheets. So we're just going to go back a little bit to have a look at the history, where we've come from to where we are today. So about 44 years ago, spreadsheets didn't exist. All right? You might think that spreadsheets are boring, and yeah, in some cases they are, but they've got a surprisingly interesting history. In 1979, spreadsheets were a space-age technology, much like your AIs and your LLMs and the LRUMs are today. So Dan Bricklin, he invented VisiCalc. Now, all he did is said, look, I want to be able to go and reference other fields, other cells, and do calculations on them. And it was that one idea, that one thought that made spreadsheets far, far more powerful than anything at the time, which is all paper-based. However, 44 years on, not a lot has changed. The spreadsheets we have today are very similar to the spreadsheets we had back then. All right, so now we're asking better questions, like what if every single cell in your spreadsheet had an AI built into it, specifically Gemini? And what if every cell in your spreadsheet could read handwritten documents, for example, and extract information from those documents, just like a human would, but at scale? So today, we're going to give you a nice little demo of a new kind of spreadsheet technology, smart AI spreadsheets. And this is just a little teaser for a bit of an overview of what these spreadsheets look like. So every cell in this smart AI spreadsheet has access to the power of Gemini AI built into it. So these spreadsheets can actually reach about 32% better accuracy than a zero-shot RAG, which is commonly used for chatbots, as you've seen today. Now you can drag and drop images into a cell, and Gemini can use a visual reasoning to identify text and objects. Cells in the smart AI spreadsheet can contain entire complex documents, and you can prompt Gemini to extract information and process them the way you want to. Just imagine if you're a company with thousands of legal contracts, and you wanted to know everything about your company's liability and exposure in each contract. Rather than going through each one individual, you can use this technology to hone in exactly those ones you need to. So Gemini, smart AI spreadsheets are now a perfect combination for this task. So here's a real life example, and I'm going to get Derek to actually talk you through it.
Thank you, Andrew. So what we've done is you saw those previous documents that we loaded up a few minutes ago. We've created a smart spreadsheet, and I want you to look at the columns on the top. So for each column, we've added in a prompt. This is a new concept to most of you. Excel doesn't let you do this. What we've done is we've said in this column, I want you to analyze all the documents on the left-hand side in the first column, and then I want you to look through them and, for example, output the date or output the state. Now, these documents are really random. They're a perfect example of handwritten, messy documentation, but they all have similar things. They've got a location of enlistment and so on. But a lot of times, things like the location of enlistment are just listed as a town, not a state. But because we're using an AI, we're using Gemini, Gemini knows where that town is in Australia, and it can give us the state automatically. And we can also massage these a little bit. So for example, if we wanted to change things to be just uppercase, we just put that in the prompt. So the prompt is a very, very powerful way of fitting things into these smart spreadsheet cells. And effectively what's happening is that Gemini AI is being run for every single cell inside of our spreadsheet. But we can use things like images and very large PDF documents as the input for Gemini inside each of those cells, which is really powerful because we can do things like tag them. So here we tag in the documents based on their condition, for example. I'll just play it one more time if we have enough time, because it goes by really quickly. I should have looped it. So once again, we start on the left with our scans. So that's just a bunch of JPEG files, right? Then we say we want to use Gemini to recognize what's on them. And we say, if you can see a title like attestation form, then output attestation form. Otherwise, if there's something else, output other. So there's a very natural way of prompting this. It's something anybody can do with minimal skill. But you can also go into much, much more detail than that. You can have very, very specific things, and the AI can even do things like calculations. For example, I said, give me the age at which this person enlisted. Back to you, Andrew.
Expert.
Yeah.
I'll grab that one off you as well. Thank you. So that's pretty cool, huh? Anyone seen anything like that before? It's pretty much bleeding edge tech. So, once we've gone and done that smart AI spreadsheet analysis, what next, right? So we can actually go and export that data into, for instance, Google Sheets, just by exporting a CSV file, bringing that into Sheets, and then going and making some charts, right? So we can actually start to create some knowledge from this data set. So this is what we've actually come up with in a very short period of time. So this entire workflow from creating an automation which can go and pull the data from the data source, run that through our spreadsheets, and do these visualizations, just 4 hours, right? And we can actually scale this to thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of records, it doesn't matter. And these can all be done simultaneously at the same time, get some scale going. So we can already see some interesting trends in the data that we have grabbed. All right, can anyone in the audience say, or just let me know any interesting things you can see from what we've grabbed so far?
The AI here isn't perfect, guys. It does make mistakes, and you do need to change the prompts a little bit. But if you guys look at that middle state representation, I didn't know this because I expected it would just show states in Australia, but there were actually a couple of people who enlisted in PNG, and they enlisted in the field. So these are things I missed when I was looking at the original documents, but the AI don't miss. It looks at every pixel. And that's where the real value of these LLM models and Gemini multimodal comes in. It gives you this rich analysis and very effectively very powerful data science. I think data science people are going to love this.
Sorry, we've also got a new state called state of enlistment as well.
It is not perfect. Sometimes you do have to adjust the prompts, but I made this whole presentation in like 4 hours, all of the interactions you saw there. So if I'd spend like a day or two on it, it would be basically.
Yeah, and you can see, we can already see our age of enlistments. We can actually see the distribution through there. We can visualize. Sorry, what was that? What's the y-axis here, Derek?
The y-axis there is just the document number. So the y-axis isn't actually meaningful, but the reason I put that chart in there is to show that a surprising number of people enlisted when they were well into their middle age. So that's actually really interesting.
Any other questions? Any notes? All right, we'll move on. So worldwide, and we've spoken about this earlier today, there's an astounding amount of corporate data waiting for these sorts of powerful AI tools. The amount of data is growing exponentially. You probably already know this, but we're generating about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data per day. That's 2.5 petabytes. That's an astounding amount of data. So all this data holds an immense value, but accessing it, weaponizing it, getting the value out of it, that's still a significant challenge, and that's what we're looking to solve today. So tools like our AI intent automation, smart AI spreadsheets, and other technologies that come along, they're going to make it significantly easy for ordinary users to work with very large volumes of data and become the masters of that data. You start managing rather than actually sitting at the coalface doing that work. So we at 3.Digital, we're proud to be leading the revolution, and we're committed to staying on this, on the forefront of the innovation, and driving this through to a rapidly evolving landscape. Any questions?
By the way, we're busy hiring at the moment, so if you're interested in joining us and working on these types of products, please scan the QR code and send us an email. We'll have a bit of a chat with you. Every time I show this to our clients, it literally boggles their mind. Like, they start cursing. They're like, why didn't we have this 10 years ago? Why didn't somebody think of this? But it's only really become possible in the last year because of multimodal models like Gemini. I'm going to say Gemini. Gemini. It's only really become possible because of those models. So, we're very excited about this. Hands up who's ever used a workflow like this, right? Hands up who wants to use workflows like this when they're dealing with massive caches of documents. Great. Thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate it. We're all done unless you wanted to have any other closing comments.
Anybody got any questions at all?
Thank you. One question. Oh, they're both proprietary. But it's in the same way that Gemini is a proprietary product. What you build on top of it could be open source. It absolutely could be, yes. How do you pay for it? That's a great question. It's based on how much you use it. So if you have a massive spreadsheet and millions of documents, you pay a little bit more. But if you only have a few thousand documents, it's usually just a few dollars. So it's basically the more you use, the more you pay as you go. Absolutely. Yeah, there's free and entry-level ones that are free that you can experiment with. Yeah.
Yeah. We work with you to find a solution that works for you.
Peter.
One thing I noticed in your demo was, when you traditional RPA, you can really speed up the automation because you're not waiting for a human or to analyze anything on the screen. In your demo, it seemed quite slow. I'm assuming that's just for our benefit, so we can just keep on top. Can you actually speed it up, or is there a natural delay because of the way large language models work?
That's a great question. So in that video, we did actually slow it down. When we're actually running these things, sometimes they run so fast you can't actually see what's happening. So it really depends what you're doing. If you want to use the full power of the LUIM, it's a bit like different LLMs have different levels. Like, there's now these really quick ones that are very fast, but there are the more powerful ones that will take a few seconds to give you an answer. You can kind of pick and match which one you want for any given scenario. And there's ones that are extremely fast where you don't actually need the AI. Just to type something in, it's instantaneous. One more question. Yes, you're exactly right. So handwriting recognition is a much, much greater cognitive task. Yeah, and basically the more complex the task, what I should say is if it gets very complicated, you actually hand it off to a person. So you can flag things for human review and you have sort of you set a line, and that's actually a better system anyway.
A good example is when something's been crossed out, initialed or rewritten, the AI can actually flag those for human review.
And then you just have a list and you filter and say, these ones are a bit sus. Maybe a human needs to look at them. We actually had one where it was crossed out and they wrote another name in very scribbly letters. So the AI wouldn't, it's not perfect, it wouldn't pick that up, but the other 99% are perfect. Any last questions? One more? Well, it's very easy to pick different models. It's just a drop down, and then you just press and it reprocesses it. We found Gemini Pro to be an extremely good model, particularly with multimodal image recognition. We're actually very happy with the results. What I would say is that you really want to have a trade-off of speed versus cost. So you think carefully, like some columns you don't need that massively powerful. You can use the Gemini, the smaller, faster one. Other ones you want Gemini Pro. One more question. So what you do is you actually get the AI, I wouldn't say the cost approach is infinity, you make a cutoff point. And what you do is you tell the AI, if you can't recognize the text, or if you can't find it or whatever, or if it's crossed out or whatever, just mark it for human review. And you'll find that only a small fraction of the documents tend to have those issues, and it's fine for somebody just to quickly look through them and be like, oh yeah. And in some cases, you just will never know. That's just the case with handwritten documents. It's impossible and it becomes illegible.
And you can use confidence levels as well to actually mark specific areas for the human to actually go in and verify and validate or fill out completely, especially if it's doctor's handwriting. Yeah. I'm with you.
You can ask the AI to give you a confidence level for every single little piece of data, like 80% confidence, very bad confidence, etc. Yeah. One more question. That's correct. For most users, there'll be a SaaS product. Oh, absolutely. Or do you want to catch that one?
I'll just take that. So majority of the use case will be SaaS. Most organizations are comfortable with the cloud. We make sure that we have the appropriate certifications. For those really paranoid organizations, we can actually run on-prem. We can run on premises. Yeah. So within their own private cloud or in their own server rooms.
So if the CIA wants to use this stuff, we can install a computer in their CIA office, and the spooky people will probably like that. Yeah.
Variable depending on the job.
Yeah, variable. It's not going to be a $500 computer from Big W. But we'll manage that process. It's not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars either. Yeah. It's variable. Depends. It depends what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.